Well, one day, everyone, I'm going to trick Hanoch and I'm going to hit the record button a little bit early and get all the things that happened to us before we go online here. But it didn't work this time because there's that little, those of you that use Zoom, you know, they've got that little voice that says this is now recording. So it's hard to do that. But Hanoch Young from Modi'in, Israel. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Compared to the rest of the world, I think I'm doing fine. A lot to talk about. And you know,
Yeah.
what's interesting is if you remember, every time we put together an itinerary for one of our Connect to Israel experiences, there was always that little caveat that based on circumstances and situations, we reserve the right to change things. So today's the perfect example. We were going to do this nice little tour, but the whole world seems to be changing. And let's kind of jump right in.
Yeah, well, hey, I don't,
Okay.
I'd like to jump in. We didn't discuss it. I'd like to jump in with the fires, and there's some little water glass there. Um, the fires in Israel. How for those that don't understand the topography real well, and
Yes.
you were trying to put the fire out with that water jug of yours, I guess. It's the thing. How close was this to you? I know you could have seen the smoke at least.
Okay. Jerusalem is about 30 kilometers. Okay, Jerusalem is about 30 kilometers away.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. I think a kilometer is 0.6 miles.
It's about 15
So
miles.
that's about 18, 19 miles, maybe. I don't know. In any math is not my strong suit. I couldn't see it from here, but I saw a lot of the pictures from Jerusalem. Devastating fire, in all likelihood, arson.
Yeah.
We do not live in an area of the world where fire, you know, there's self-combustion. It doesn't happen by itself. So it happens either one of two ways. Either accidental, someone drops a lit cigarette, something stupid like that, throws something out the window of their car, or arson.
Mm-hmm.
And after the initial speculation, there hasn't been a single word said about it.
Wow.
Which leads me to believe that it's arson.
Mm-hmm.
Because it serves various purposes to kind of keep that, you know, quiet. On the one hand, we have, I don't know, are you frozen?
No, go ahead.
Okay, good. You know, it as we go into what else is going on in Israel and the security situation and how the situation in Afghanistan, what that means for us here in Israel.
Okay.
I'll give you a few more examples of things that appear in the news or don't appear in the news, and you have to kind of piece them together.
Okay. You know, I guess and this was not a loss of life, but to see the devastation of the shop.
Horrific.
For the
lorries.
Yeah. I met them years ago, and we have one of their door harps in our house that I bought a couple of times ago when I was in Israel with from Moshe Kempinski. Had a couple. He said I forgot they were even there, and so I got one of those. And what a great couple! The devastation of 40 years of that business. Yeah, they used to be right off of Jaffa.
Yeah, it reminds me a few years ago, there was another horrific fire in the Jerusalem area, and it destroyed the workshop and inventory of the famed artist Yoram Ranan. Now, I had been there in 2015, right around the time of our Connect tour, and met him and saw it. And yeah, when you realize that an entire life's work, you know, is gone, it is devastating.
Yeah,
absolutely devastating.
Yeah. And I sent an email to Miriam Feinberg, and my old guide as opposed to my young guide. I sent her an email. I have not heard back from her. So if you happen to have a few minutes and can send a text or something, sure would appreciate that.
Sure.
And she lives up in Corridor, of course. So, okay, put all the pieces together for us today. Make sense out of this thing.
Well, first of all,
the wise one.
Well, you know, it's interesting. When I look for inspiration, I think back to movies that I've seen.
Uh-oh.
And one of the ones that was most influential, of course, was Animal House. And the advice given at one point was start drinking heavily. So, you know, I'm starting light, but, you know, we have to, okay. Our security situation. First of all, about 2 weeks ago, we discussed just for a few seconds the fact that some quote unquote rogue Palestinian faction in Lebanon fired a couple of rockets into Israel. And I remember mentioning, since it wasn't Hezbollah, you know, no big deal. Well, about 48 hours later, Hezbollah fired off 19 rockets. Now, just a few words about Hezbollah. Hezbollah, now, most of our audience are Americans. When Americans think of terrorists from the Middle East, they think of a couple of clowns in keffiyehs, you know, running around going like Xena, warrior princess. No big deal. Hezbollah and their armed forces are more powerful and dangerous than most of the nations of Europe. They are a state within a state in Lebanon. Okay, they fired 19 rockets. The official word here was, and you know, by the way, you know, we now respond to everything.
Yeah.
But it reminds me during the Oslo War. And what, you know, what's interesting is you and I always refer to it as the Oslo War because it was. To the rest of the world, it's the second intifada, which sounds, you know, kind of like a demonstration gone wild, or, you know, Antifa on the march, you know, something really stupid. And of course, last week was the 20th anniversary of the Sbarro's pizza shop bombing in Jerusalem.
Yes.
And if we have time today, we should speak about that a little bit. But okay, so the word, now we seem to fire back, but what is it that we're hitting? During the Oslo War, we constantly bombed the police stations of the so-called Palestinian Authority after warning them that we were going to do it. I'm convinced that the pictures that I kept seeing were the same police station being bombed, rebuilt, bombed. Okay. That doesn't mean that, well, okay. We're told that it wasn't that big a deal because the missiles were not fired at cities. They went into open areas. The problem is, it's like copyright infringement. Either you enforce your copyright or you don't.
Yeah.
It's one extreme or the other. Here's the problem. Years ago, Rav Kahana gave us a lesson. This would have been 45 years ago. How to read the New York Times. I remember it. And what it was that you look at articles that don't necessarily mention Israel or Jews, and then you figure out the connection. It's fascinating. So let me explain something to you. The Iron Dome is set to only intercept missiles that are going towards populated areas.
Okay.
Okay. It's not foolproof. It's not flawless, but that's the way it's set up, because those missiles which sadly are made in America, which we buy, very sadly, are very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 or 3 days later, I caught a small article in an Israeli periodical mentioning that most of those that were fired, now again, we're told it's no big deal. They were fired and they went into open areas. No big deal. But then this article said that most of them were intercepted by Iron Dome and Patriot missile batteries.
Mm.
It makes you wonder.
Okay.
Meanwhile, we just had a rocket, I think it was yesterday, from Hamas. And today, of course, the response is that we're allowing in more goods. You know, my t-shirt, I didn't wear it today. Today, I'm wearing another inspirational t-shirt, which I'll talk about in a moment. Nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah.
We are following the same pattern. Someone asked me the other day flat out, it's interesting, I'm getting interesting emails from people saying Hezbollah is known to now have 150,000 missiles, most with a precision guidance system, 150,000 missiles. That means they could fire 1,000 missiles at us. You know, I mean, and when we speak about the next war in Lebanon, that's the difference between Israelis and Americans. Americans speak about the possibility of going to war.
Mm-hmm.
We only talk about when the date is. We know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, Israel's promise to destroy Lebanon's infrastructure and bring it back to the Middle Ages doesn't concern Hezbollah at all. They could lose 150,000 Lebanese civilians, and it only serves their purpose.
Mm-hmm. We're
caught in a real serious dilemma. It all stems from our having fled, FLED, during the night, like thieves in the night, from southern Lebanon, allowing Hezbollah to occupy the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we get to the big story. Afghanistan.
Yeah.
There is way too much to talk about Afghanistan. I am going to try to confine my remarks strictly what it means for Israelis. Okay. What does it mean for Israel? We don't have the time. If we had several hours, we can address what it means for America. We'll talk about that briefly, but I just want to give some insight from our perspective. If anyone was under the impression that you could count on America, please clean out your ears. And there's something between your right ear and your left ear that's not working right if you believe that. Are you frozen, Mike?
No, I'm just listening. We're having a little bit of connection issues, but your audio is good, so.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to just keep going. Hopefully I won't leave any stupid expressions on my face. Okay. America spent 20 years creating, training, and equipping a 300,000 man army. Now, Americans don't appreciate the size of things because of how big your country is. So let me compare it. We in Israel have a standing army of 169,000 men and women. Approximately 460,000 men and women in the reserves. Now, billions upon billions upon billions of dollars of American military equipment, the latest and the greatest, were left to the Taliban.
Yeah.
Including, I'm just going to give one example. 42 Black Hawk helicopters, each at a price tag of $6 million apiece, to the Afghan Air Force. We in Israel only have 48 Black Hawk helicopters. Now, before someone says to me, Hanoch, how good do you think the Afghan Air Force is? What about the Pakistanis?
Mm-hmm.
What about the Iranians?
Mm-hmm.
Understand something. In 2001, the Taliban controlled much of Afghanistan, but not the entire country. Now they've got the whole thing, the entire enchilada. America has always, in every peace plan, stipulated that they would guarantee our safety. Bill Clinton did. George Bush, forgot his real name. What's the thing of W?
Yeah.
Obama, Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump one day on a whim, remember, now this is, now again, saying anything that could be perceived as negative about Trump puts me in the same category of the Antichrist for most of our listeners. I understand that.
Not for ours, but for others, maybe.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay. Trump decided one morning he was going to pull US troops out of an area of Syria that was essential for our security. Okay? So the Trump plan, thank God that it never went through. Remember that tunnel that was going to go from the Hebron area to Gaza?
Yeah.
It was going to be protected by America, and all the wheels on the bus go round and round, was all going to be greased by American tax dollars. Every American administration has promised now.
Yeah.
The one last thing about Afghanistan. Well, actually, two last things. Firstly, America was successful in Afghanistan initially because Afghanistan is made up of tribes. The tribes that were opposed to the Taliban took American money, American weapons, and American support and fought against the Taliban. The problem was that America then decided that they were going to modernize Afghanistan and make it a Western-style democracy. Most people in Afghanistan do not think that they live in a country called Afghanistan. Afghanistan is made up. They're clans, they're tribes. It's a whole different world.
Mm-hmm.
It's an American naivete of thinking that the world thinks like they think. That's again where Israel comes in. All of a sudden, you've got the 2 states for 2 people. That's a very American sounding solution for us here in Israel. Mm-hmm. 2 states for 2 people. Israel gets a state, the so-called Palestinians get a state, even though one never existed in history. Now, when they chant from the river to the sea, they're not talking about 2 states for 2 people. Who talks about 2 states for 2 people? The Americans and stupid liberal Jews who don't know any better. Yeah. So this is the situation. So for those who were thinking that America would be by our side when we are forced eventually to strike against Iran directly, not just their proxies in Syria and Lebanon and elsewhere. Here's the other thing. Someone else asked me, since the year 2000, when Israel fled southern Lebanon at night under Ehud Barak, one of our most decorated soldiers ever. By the way, ex-generals in Israel never make good politicians.
No, their brains fall out somewhere right before they get in the Knesset. I think they do some kind of an operation at the door of the Knesset, stupidity.
Yeah, leave your brains outside.
Yeah.
Okay. I just distracted myself and I apologize.
Ehud Barak.
Ehud Barak, Lebanon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why didn't Israel wage a preemptive war to destroy those missiles? And I did a lot of research into our military history, even though I know much of it off the top of my head, honestly. Since 1967, we have only launched 2 major preemptive strikes in Syria and in Iraq, both against nuclear reactors. We only launch a preemptive war with a nuclear threat.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it would have been nice, because we were terribly criticized for destroying Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor and whole nuclear program. It would have been nice if some American general at some point, with Operation Iraqi Freedom, would have said, oh, by the way, shout out to those in Israel. Thank God our American boys didn't have to face tactical nuclear weapons from Saddam. But anyway, so here we are, more convinced than ever before that we're totally, absolutely alone. But that creates the opportunity, because although we can't count on the world Jewish community, there are all these people who are running around saying, we're part of Israel. We're Ephraim. Now's a chance, guys. Now's the time to stand up. It was in my blog post that I put out yesterday. Mm-hmm. You were probably shocked. 2 blog posts in a week. What the heck is wrong with that Hanoch guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Elul. The king is in the field. Yeah, so what?
Yeah. Yeah. What are you going to do about it? This is where, that there's a number of pet peeves I have. One of those is the pin that has the American flag with the Israeli flag.
Yeah.
To me, this is like standing on the border of Egypt with, it's like 1 foot in Egypt and 1 foot in Canaan, and trying to decide where your weight's going to be, because where your weight is where you're going to tip to. At some point, people have to make a decision, and you've heard me say it. You need to, in our day, and I use my words very carefully here. In our day, you must decide what kingdom you will pledge allegiance to, because to pledge allegiance to the wrong kingdom is going to be a disaster in the end. We must make a decision. And I know that most of our listeners would at least be on the road to that decision. Right. But there are the multitudes out there. The whole concept that you're speaking of Israel coming to the place of understanding America does not have your back, does not have your side, does not have your front, does not have anything. America will disown in our present, and I'm not talking about the people of conservative, and I'm talking about America as a political and religious system, to throw that in. I was talking with someone the other day and mentioned that it was in Nazi Germany, it was the church, the German church had been politicized to the point that they had lost any message they had, and they stood, for the most part, lockstep with Hitler.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're in that place today also, I believe, in America. for Israel to have to come to the place of saying, we have no one to look to except Hashem. That, in my opinion, is the best day Israel could come to.
Without a doubt, without a doubt, it's just like staggering. And when I it's been almost obsessive to keep reading these news reports from Kabul. It brings back too many memories of being a kid in 1975 and watching this unfold in South Vietnam.
Yeah.
And, again, it would be too easy to pick on Biden right now, but a little vignette, something that people may not have realized. People made a big deal out of, I think it was 500 or 600 Afghan refugees being flown out. This is the United States of America. Israel, which is a fraction of the size of the US, a fraction of the resources, doesn't have the Air Force to compare to, airlifted 10,000 Ethiopian Jews in one day. Where there's a will, there's a way. And again, whether it was incompetency, whether it was whatever it was, the political and military echelons of the United States of America. Now, again, remember, even during the Trump administration and the Obama administration, America had determined they were going to leave Afghanistan. This is not a new idea. Question is, how do you do it? How do you do it? And again, the Taliban never had an entire country before. So Al-Qaeda's back, ISIS is back. It's like the more things, if nothing changes, nothing changes. But this is a tremendous opportunity for us.
Oh yeah, yeah. The whole mindset that all it takes to bring peace to the world is a Chick-fil-A franchise in Kabul. Send them as, and I can't stand this statement of people, the Lord's chicken. Come on, give me a break, guys. But that's the mindset of if we
Did you just say the Lord's chicken?
Yeah. Yeah, because they're closed on Sunday. Of course, if you and I observe Shabbat, then it's legalistic. But for Hobby Lobby, the anti-Semitic organization that they are, and I have nothing really against Chick-fil-A. I just, people just kind of go crazy over this thing. I got off track. You got me off track again. But to just, it used to be that we used McDonald's, that just export McDonald's. Now it's Chick-fil-A or something like that. But that's not what these people want. These people, for you to bomb their country back into the 17th century, they'd go, yes, that's what we were wanting all the time.
England in the 19th century fought a handful of wars in Afghanistan and lost. The Soviet Union, which is a lot more brutal than the US, fought in Afghanistan and lost. This was a foregone conclusion. The problem is Hamas, Hezbollah, and all the other terrorists in the world are saying, you know what? They hung on in Afghanistan for 20 years. They yesed the Americans to death.
Well,
and they got to throw Americans out of their country.
Yeah, yeah. And it comes down to this one basic thought for me, Hanoch, and we're running out of time here. Here's the one basic thought. You cannot build anybody that calls America a democracy does not know that they forgot civics. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. Look at the Pledge of Allegiance. It says republic. You don't know the difference between a republic and democracy, go online. You can probably find out something. I wouldn't go to Wikipedia or Snoops, okay? But you cannot build a self-governing rule without this book. Now, mine, when I say this book is a little thicker than this book, and that's okay. But the foundation of both of our books is Bereshit. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's the foundation that we share.
Yeah.
Those in Afghanistan, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, they're not starting from the same book. No. You can't come to the same conclusion when you begin with different foundations.
The other thing is they're coming from countries whose borders were created in the 20th century, primarily. Mm-hmm. I mean, you and I grew up in America, always knowing what this was America.
Yeah.
This was America, in the 18th century. This was, the expansion in the West. This was, Hawaii, Alaska, etc. The Louisiana Purchase. But that was America. These people never had that. And they're not interested in it. It's not their culture.
No, it isn't. Yeah, they don't have signs that say, welcome to Alabama. They don't understand Leonard Skinner and Sweet Home Alabama, because their boundaries are based upon it's the boundaries in an Islamic country are always moving. They're always moving based upon who's winning the battle. And so you never have a boundary that someone respects. And this goes to last week's Torah portion. Do not move your neighbor's boundary. If you don't respect someone's boundary, then how can you possibly have any kind of relationship? Because they're always trying to move your boundary. Yeah. It's like having a bad neighbor.
Yeah. One quick word about today's shirt. The back has all the words. It's the quote from King Theoden in Lord of the Rings when he was motivating the Rohirrim to charge. This is where we are, guys. We're on the verge of it. This is war. And why it is that people don't realize it, I don't know. But then that comes up to the Left Behind series. Not for another day.
Yeah, there you go. Well, where else can you tune in to a program in which one of the co-hosts, the only thing that I kind of, figure out, I just try to, before we begin recording, I think, okay, what shirt did I have on last week? Okay, and try not to wear the same shirt 2 weeks in a row. Hanoch, on the other hand, has decided the direction the program is going to go, gets in that closet of his with the Hanoch t-shirt collection. It's just a good thing that you're not into shoes.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. So Imelda Marcos was, and it didn't work out well for her.
All right, brother. Take care.
Until next week. Bye-bye.